There's one or two things I'd like to say. You've got it all wrong. You don't need to follow me. You don't need to follow anybody. You're all individuals. Yes, we are all individuals. You're all different. Yes, we are all different. I'm not. Shh. You've all got to work it out for yourselves. Yes, we've all got to work it out for ourselves. Exactly. Tell us more! Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Jolly Heretic. Now, today I would like to talk about the issue of names, and specifically the issue of why it is that everybody seems to have their own obscure, weird name these days. I was once at the Wisley Glow at Wisley Gardens in Surrey, and as I've said before, I met a couple who had a daughter called Tiger Sky. And I asked them why on earth they wanted to call their daughter Tiger Sky. And the answer was, well, it was a unique name, and we wanted her to have a unique name, and something special, a unique name. And this idea is more and more common. Why is this idea more and more common? It's more and more common because we have runaway individualism. And if you therefore signal your individualism and how individualistic you are and what a nonconformist you are by giving your child a bizarre name. Now, ironically, of course, that means that, as with the life of Brian, to which I alluded there, it is being a conformist, it is being traditionalist, it is having a low sense of your self-worth rather than the sense that you're unique and brilliant and special, that is the rebellion. It is conforming to traditional ideas that is the rebellion. It is naming your children using the names that our society has always used, and thus keeping them in touch with the ancestors and what the ancestors did and all of this sort of thing that creates a group-oriented, united, cohesive society. It is wanting that kind of society that is the rebellion. And it is being unique and signalling your uniqueness and signalling it in the names you give your children or yourself or whatever, that is the extreme conformism. Now, how has this happened? Well, as I've discussed before, we were under very strong conditions of Darwinian selection, including group selection, wherein groups that are high in internal cooperation tend to dominate other groups, until about 1800. We then have the Industrial Revolution, and also it starts to get a lot warmer. The result of that is that Darwinian selection pressures become weaker. The result of that is that the child mortality rate falls from 1% to 50%. The result of that is that we become more genetically diverse. We deviate from being very, very strongly group-oriented, and basically all genetically very, very similar and strongly group-oriented, which is a highly genetic trait, to being more and more and more individualist. We become therefore lower in these group moral foundations of obedience to authority, in-group loyalty, and sanctity, of whereby you sanctify that which is group adaptive, to being higher in these individualist foundations of equality, where you want everybody to be the same, and of harm avoidance, where you're looking out for the individual. And this increases over time, and other factors as well acts to undermine the religiousness, which tends to take these group-oriented ideas and make them into the will of God, such as that we're low in stress and mortality salience. And so eventually, so many people are individualist rather than group-oriented that a tipping point is reached, which probably happened around about the 60s, where it flips over, and everybody migrates onto what seems like the up-and-coming winning team, which is the individualist society. And therefore you get where you used to get, under group conditions, runaway groupism. People would signal their group values, their bravery and whatever, and more intelligent people would imbibe those values, realize they could get ahead by believe them more, and signal them, leading to runaway group signaling. You get the opposite. More intelligent people imbibe the values of the news system. They realise they can get ahead by convincing themselves of their reality. They convince themselves of their reality, and they signal, Runaway, how individualistic they are. Now, you see this among particularly people in the middle of society, because if you're in the middle of society, one of the ways that what you're going to want is to get to the top, and you'll do that by signalling individualistic values of equality and harm avoidance, and therefore emotionally manipulating people into thinking you're highly moral or whatever, and you should get to the top. It's one method. You get this among Protestants. So until the rise of Protestantism, everybody had the same sorts of names: George and Mary and Margaret and Edward and Henry, and these traditional English names. The Protestants came up with this ideology of the priesthood of all believers, whereby everybody was equal and everybody should read the Bible. They signalled their commitment to this by reading the Bible and by saying, "Oh, look, I know all these biblical names," and therefore they gave their children these biblical names that hadn't previously been used, these obscure biblical names like Isaiah and Isaac and whatever. And you get runaway signalling of these ridiculous and also names to do with qualities like temperance and constance and whatever. And you get runaway signalling of these names until by about, I think it was 1591 somewhere, you had a child that was called Heaven on High Hodgson, the poor sod. Heaven on High Hodgson. And so this is an example of how this can happen. Now, this leads to a greater diversity of names, and eventually you get more of an equilibrium. But again, at any given stage, those that want to signal their individualism will do so using the names of their children. So when you get the romanticism ideology coming in, again in the middle class, they want to signal it how romantic they are. So they start using these revived Anglo-Saxon names like Alfred and things like this. And that's always the way. So names are a good marker of what's going on. Now, in a society that's strongly group-oriented, there should be a limit on how ridiculous names become. Often at the bottom of society, by the way, you get people who will signal a degree of individualism, but also they're kind of signalling group loyalty in a way, by naming their children after famous people. So you get the rise of people's surnames as Christian names, like Nelson, Benjamin Disraeli Smith, things like this. But this is held within certain boundaries. What we have now, though, is runaway individualism, where it is considered good to give your children really, really unusual names. Now, at the bottom of society, the way that this manifests, it's still a kind of power search. It's that they will name their children after people that have been famous on TV, like Friends. 5 years after the TV series Friends came out, you've got all these Phoebes and Monicas and Chandlers and whatever in school. But those that are in the middle of society, that's not good enough. They don't want to signal power or whatever, or bless their children with a sense of power. They want to signal individualism, and so therefore they will come up with really silly names. They will make up names, and a good example of that would be something like Tiger Sky. Now, this is definitely happening. Jennifer Twenge has looked at this. Firstly, she's noted that an interest among women in keeping your name, in keeping your maiden name when you get married, is associated with regarding the name as important to the identity, and also with being very high in a sense of uniqueness and thinking basically that you're special. So those are the kinds of people that are interested in the name and interested in using the name as a means of signalling. In another paper called Fitting In or Standing Out, Jennifer Twenge looks at names between 1880 and 2007 in the UK, 325 million baby names, and finds that you have an increase across time in less common names, i.e. an increase in the uniqueness of names, an increase in individualism. Interestingly, this decreases between about 1920 and 1949, which is interesting, and it's consistent with the idea that between the wars we became more conservative and that sort of thing. We were more group oriented, which makes sense considering what was happening. But then after that, off we go again, and there's a massive increase in the uniqueness of names from 1983 onwards. So society is coming apart, not just genetically, not just with polarization, not just politically, but literally in how people are named. More people have names that nobody else has. And this, of course, is a reflection of runaway individualism and basically the breakdown of society into warring microcosms. Twenge has another paper called Still Standing Out, where she looks at the data between 2005 and 2015. Again, huge increase in individualism names. Now, this is a bit of a problem, because she also shows that twin studies have indicated that if you've got a silly name, then this is actually bad for you, because people, it's not clear why, but in that she's controlling for genetics by and at least for family background by using twin studies. You can't say, oh well, if you've got a silly name, you've got parents that are high in individualism, parents who are maybe high in neuroticism, and therefore they strongly desire to conform to the current ideology because they fear exclusion, and therefore they strongly give their child a unique name, or that they need a sense of structure in their lives because they are neurotic and they're high in negative feelings, and therefore they become extremely individualist and they give their child unique name. That can't be the case, because there is this is among twins. The twin that has the less desirable name, the name that's considered more weird, in many ways the name that's considered more unique, has worse life outcomes. People with uncommon names are more likely to drop out, they are more likely to be maladjusted, they are more likely to have problems in life, they are more likely to need help, they are more lonely, and whatever. And this, as I say, is controlling for background, so it can't just be sort of heritable eccentricity. So this implies it is bad for people to have unique names, because they will be mocked, they will be discriminated against, they will feel that there's no one like them, they will feel lonely and strange. You know, when my name's Edward, and when I meet somebody else called Edward, and you're a fellow Edward, right, you've gone through life with the same name as I have, you know, and so you know what that's like, and so they don't experience this, and they perhaps get mocked as a consequence. So it's not good for society. It ironically, it's reflecting a breakdown in the degree to which society is group-oriented, and being group-oriented is associated, by the way, with low levels of mental instability, obviously, because you're more likely to be group-oriented if you're low in mental instability, but also it's impacting mental instability. It's making people more mentally unwell to have these bizarre names. Now, another thing that's changing, it's not just what you're named, it's how you name yourself. If there's this constant competition to be unique, then people that don't have a unique name will tend to want to come up with one. Now, this has often been the case if you're an actor or something, you want to stand out from the crowd. So Catherine Jones becomes Catherine Zeta-Jones or whatever. But this is happening way beyond that. People are changing their names so that they have more unique and interesting names. And deed polls indicate that the number of people changing their names has doubled since 2015. So this again is consistent with runaway uniqueness. And if you look at the nature of the names that are being given to children, of course, they become sillier and sillier. And it is those that are at the top that are of society that are, of course, at the vanguard of this, because they are at the vanguard of culture, and culture is increasingly individualist. And so you have David Beckham, perfectly sensible name, giving his son the name Brooklyn Beckham, because Brooklyn is where he was conceived, or something like that. You have Bob Geldof and Paula Yates, perfectly sensible names, giving their daughter the name Peaches Geldof, or giving another daughter the name Heavenly Harana Lily. You have Frank Zappa, well, Zappa's made up, but Frank, perfectly sensible name, giving his son the name Moon Unit. So you have people. There was a boy when I was at school. I mean, this is insane. His surname was Michael, so his parents thought they'd make him a bit unique by calling him Michael. And so the uniqueness of names has gone. It used to be something that indicated being of the lower socioeconomic status. We had a group-oriented society in which you conformed. It would be, and you indicated your conformity. It was people at the bottom of society that didn't understand this, didn't imbibe this ideology, and were anyway less conformist, because they tend to be lower in conscientiousness and lower in agreeableness than people higher up, and thus less conformist. And so therefore it was the working class that were the generators of strange names, of unusual names. And this would either be a place for status, Benjamin Disraeli Smith or whatever, or Nelson or Wellesley or Lusitania or something that had been in the news, or it would be made up sort of names, or it would be peculiar spellings of normal names. So Gordon spelled Gordon or that sort of thing. And this has often been noticed among black people as well, that you get this sort of, you get this sort of thing, because those at the bottom are more individualist. But now that individualism has become the dominant ideology, this has ascended further up the social scale, and it is those that are in the middle and at the top that are generating the most ridiculous names and are playing for status by doing so, by signalling their individualism with their own names and the names of their offspring. And this individualism is it can be seen more broadly a desire to be unique, a desire to be completely different. Now, from simply having bizarre names, you get those that simply have one name among those that are high in social status. And I see this as this could be the next step. So you get people who are celebrities that are known as Prince, or Billy, or Cheryl, or Oprah. They're known as one, or Boris even. Those that are of very, very high status simply have one name. And this could be the next step. Ironic, really, because it used to be, if we go back 1,000 years, the marker of status was having two names. Those that had one name, they were peasants. Those that had a surname, a hereditary surname, they were those of high status. To this day, in Iceland, where there are no hereditary surnames among most people, it's just your name and father's name and son, or father's name and daughter, it's the aristocratic families in Iceland that have hereditary surnames. And this was the case in Finland as well until about 100 years ago. Surnames changed according to where you moved to, but the aristocracy had hereditary surnames. This may be going into reverse because of this constant desire for uniqueness, which leads to this runaway individualism. Another thing, this constant desire to be different, I think, can be seen in this whole transgender movement. This idea that, I'm not binary, I'm not man or woman, I'm something different. And then you have this, you have what pronoun you are. I'm he, I'm him, I'm she, I'm her. But then you have I'm too unique to be that. I'm too unique to be he or she. I'm some other pronoun that I've come up with. And then there's a list of pronouns, and no, I'm too unique to have that pronoun. I have another pronoun which I've just made up because I'm just so unique and so special. And not only that, but you shouldn't cheat. I'm like the Queen. I'm like the monarchy. I will, when you meet the Queen, someone says to you, okay, well, you have to call her Your Majesty on the first and the Ma'am thereafter. I'm like that. I'm going to tell you, you have to address me like this. And then you have to address me like this. And I want there to be sanctions if you don't address me like this. I want you to lose your job if you don't address me like this. I want it to be instantiated into law that you must address me how I tell you to address me, because I'm so unique and I'm so special, and you have to acknowledge that I'm unique and I'm special, which is, of course, the ultimate narcissistic thing, to want people to acknowledge how you to defer to you and acknowledge how unique and how special you are. But this is what is happening. You see the same thing in sexuality. When I was a boy, you had straight people and you had gay people. Then you had the development of bisexuality as well. And now there's all this other stuff coming on. These people saying, "Oh, I'm too different and unique to be anything like that. I'm pansexual. I'm whatever sexual. I'm something else." And these things carry on and carry on and carry on, with very little to stop them, as people constantly want to assert in this very narcissistic way. Narcissism, of course, being marked by a belief that you're special, that you're different, that there's no one like you. It's almost solipsistic, whereby nothing else exists except you. You're in charge of everything. And you're going to get the same thing with ethnic identity. People say, "Oh, I'm not this. I'm something else." I'm beyond ethnic categories. I'm unique. I'm beyond them. I don't fit into your normal categories. It's basically runaway narcissism, because that's what individualism is. It's basically, in its most extreme form, individualism is narcissism. Individualism is saying, I am special. I don't fit in with the group. I am different from other people. I am unique. That is the ultimate narcissistic belief. I am unique, and my children are unique. And what we're seeing is a promotion of this completely anti-group oriented, pro-individualism, narcissistic idea, and it is reflected in the nature of the names. Sorry, it wasn't heaven on a high Hodgson. I just know it was safe on high Hodgson. But anyway, the point remains that what those people were doing was signalling their individualism, signalling that they don't conform to the dominant Catholicism. They conform to something else. But at least they were conforming to some kind of group, and they were playing for status within that group. Protestantism. What we have here is a much broader, less clear group of the dominant ideology of multiculturalism, and whereby you signal your conformity to it ironically by being as unique as possible. So you signal your conformity through uniqueness. The true rebellion, the true non-conformity, therefore becomes traditionalism, therefore becomes eschewing all of this and doing what we frankly should do, which is naming our children after our ancestors, naming our children using the names that have always been there in a corpus of names. Finland, until recently anyway, had a name law whereby there were certain recognised names and anything else was banned. Some couple wanted to call their child Axel, spelt as in Axl Rose, rather than the Finnish name Akseli. And they went to court about this because they wanted to call their child Axel. But what all teachers will notice, and you're getting it even in Finland now, is this runaway use of extraordinary names, of weird names, of foreign names. I remember meeting a girl when I was a child called India, for example, a white girl. And this is only going to get worse, and it reflects the complete breakdown of society. Now, as I've discussed before, these kinds of individualists, if they have children, don't tend to have that many, and it is those who are the group-oriented, i.e. the rebellious types, that tend to have most children. So we're probably going to see a rise once again in the Henrys and the Jameses and the Edwards and whatever, and these traditional and the Margarets and so on, these traditional names. But anyway, that is the situation. And I thought in honour of Easter, and in honour of the life of Brian, and the idea that is so piquantly shown, whereby you have these left-wing people who are high in individualistic values, and one of them dares to say, I'm not unique, I'm not different. I thought it would be worth discussing. Well, I hope this has been of interest, and if it has, then please feel free to subscribe. It really, really helps if you do that. And remember, I live stream on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. New York. If you want to help the channel, you can see ways to do so below. And to any of the drinkers at the Jolly Heretic who are pregnant, for goodness sake, don't call your child, if it's a girl, Tiger Sky. And on that note, goodbye!